hydraulic fracturing is not a new technology. It's in the news right now, obviously, but the first well in Michigan that was hydraulically fractured in 1952. So it's been 60 years since it's been happening in Michigan. Since that time, there's been approximately 12,000, a little over 12,000 wells that have been hydraulically fractured in Michigan. The vast majority of those are in a formation up here called the Antrim Shale. They're more of a traditional fracture job as far as they use 30 to 100,000 gallons of fracturing fluid. All right, what the difference is and why it's in the news now is that hydraulic fracturing on some of these deeper shales, companies are using 1 million gallons, 2 million gallons, 3 million gallons of fracturing fluid instead of the 30,000 to 100,000 that people typically associate with that. So it's the exact same process, just a larger volume of fluid. And it's important to note, I think, over these 60 years and these 12,000 times yet, we haven't had a case yet where we've had groundwater that was contaminated because hydraulic fracturing fluid migrated up into an aquifer.
Industry and regulators often assert that there have been no cases of water contamination directly related to fracking. Yet, reliable sources claim over 1,000 documented cases. My question is, if there was water contamination directly related to fracking, what would that look like? How would you know?
You have to make a distinction between, you're talking about two different things. You're talking about hydraulic fracturing or you're talking about contamination. They're two different issues. All right, oil and gas industry, like any industry in this country, is going to, from time to time during the production phase of the well, there can always be a spill or an accident, okay? And that's happened in the oil and gas industry. That's going to continue to happen. A valve could break at the surface, a pipeline could break, lightning could hit a tank. That does happen. That will happen in the future. There can be spills, all right? But we either need to talk about contamination or we need to talk about hydraulic fracturing. Hydraulic fracturing itself, the process of putting that stuff down there under pressure and breaking the rock formations, that process itself hasn't created fractures or allowed fluids to come back up through there and contaminate the groundwater.
Another part of that question is, please explain in detail the start to finish water testing details in a way that I can take this information back to the citizens of my county.
I assume
is there such?
Yeah, it's not required that they test like residential. I assume you're talking about residential water wells.
Yes, I think I gather.
Right. That's not. Right, we have a document that's coming out that has a recommended set of parameters and analysis that if it wasn't published this week, it's going to be coming out real soon. And, with set parameters of what we recommend you should test your water for. It's going to be on our website if you want to test your water prior to an oil or gas company coming in. Michigan doesn't have a regulation as far as saying the oil and gas operator has to go to your house and test your water. So, it's not something that you have to test every 6 months or a year or whatever.
Okay.
We do not unless there's a spill.
Well, you do water monitoring around the well. Like how?
We do water monitoring if it's a large volume water withdrawal. We just didn't have time to I have slides on. We didn't have time to get into all this. If there's a large volume water withdrawal, one of the additional regulations that was put forth in that supervisor wells instructions was the installation of a monitoring well between their water extraction well and the nearest residential homeowner's well, if there's a homeowner within a quarter mile. And they monitor that well, they monitor the static water level while they're doing their freshwater extraction, and that's done to protect the homeowner's well from going dry. You know what I mean? They don't want to over pump the aquifer and dry out an aquifer. So that's the type of they're not sampling it for contaminants because they're not putting anything in, they're pulling fresh water out.
You're saying that during drilling, fracking operations, using no water?
They withdraw about 8,000 gallons of water.
Well, you did during the withdrawal. Around the aquifer through drilling and fracking and the production is no water on it?
Correct.
on the first thing that was said about how there's a document, I guess, that citizens can use to test their water. Again, the burden's falling on the citizens. And that's a problem, because this is an expensive test. And people don't just have time and money to go test their water and then be able to prove that it was contaminated. So I think the industry should be held accountable.
Okay.